Dr. Madhuri Kulkarni is an assistant professor at Department of Statistics, Savitribai Phule Pune University since 2003, teaching various statistical courses. She is a PhD holder in statistics from KBC North Maharashtra University, a recipient of prestigious US Nair Young Statistician Award. She is also a Research Council member of Association for Research in Homeopathy, Mumbai, India. She is also working in collaboration with research institutes, including SEARCH, that is with Dr. Abhay Bang, and TDU, Research in Ayurveda. Under her guidance, two students have completed the MPhil degree and two are completing their PhDs as well. She has completed three research projects, two with Armament Research and Development Establishment, a defense lab, ARD at Pune, and another one for DST SERB, India. She also has a book to her name, co-authored, titled Asymptotic Statistical Inference, a basic course using R, which has been published by Springer in 2022. She also has developed e-content and also has a YouTube channel for statistic learners. Once again, I welcome you all, Madhuri Kulkarni ma'am. I request you to take over the session. Over to you.
Thank you, ma'am, for such a nice introduction. And I'm really feeling honored to be among the VIT participants again after a long gap of 9 years. And I still remember the kind of response that I had gotten that time. And it's still there in the memory. It was that good. So I hope that the current participants also get benefited from the discussion or the session that we are going to have. So may I start my lecture now?
Yes, madam. Madhuri, madam, you being with us is a privilege. So
Thank you, ma'am.
we are really happy to listen to you again, and hope
Thank you.
same will be the response of participants today. Thank you.
I will try. I will try. My
Thank you.
aim of today's session is to do some basic statistical stuff and to learn the basics, conceptual understanding, and then how to do it in R. So I will show step by step. I'll go slow. So when I start the discussion on related to R Studio, I would be going slow. So those who have already installed R Studio, they would be able to do it. At least few of them are able to do it. If they are able to do it, it will be all right. And I would be sharing all the material also. So those who are not able to do it now, they'll be able to do it later on using those commands.
Yes,
So I'll start the talk now. I'll share the screen.
Yeah.
First,
Madam,
I'll
please check
introduce
it.
what.
Yeah.
Yes,
Please
ma'am.
check
Can I
it.
share?
Yes, you can, ma'am. If you
Yeah,
see any
okay.
problem, I will be making you as a co-host.
Sure. So, okay. So I'll share entire screen because then I can show whatever I want to. So okay. So this is the first talk. So I hope that the participants may I put it full screen? Will it be
I
possible in
think
Zoom?
it's readable. It's visible.
Is it readable at your end, ma'am?
Yes, madam. Yes.
Okay, then I'll keep as it is. Otherwise, okay. So today we are first going to understand what do we mean by testing of hypothesis, which covers majority of the part of statistical inference. Statistical inference is majorly divided into two categories: point estimation and testing of hypothesis. Because I'm talking to engineers. Majority of them are engineers and research scholars. So several times they come across basic tests, statistical test, or they have data wherein they are advised to apply some t-test, p value, and all these notions come up. So first I'm going to introduce basics of testing of hypothesis, and then we will see how it can be done in R. And at the last, around the end of the session, I'm also going to try to teach something which is never taught in any of the books. So that too we shall let us see what all we can do. So let us have a look at the testing first. So you might have heard, okay, apply t-test to this hypothesis, or apply t-test to this data, or apply z-test to this data, what is pair t-test, or the usual t-test, or chi-square test. So all these terms, I think at least some of the participants must have heard. So, what do we mean by testing in statistical sense? So, do testing that is done by engineers, wherein you are conducting some tests and you are checking whether. So this is not that kind of testing. This testing is a kind of testing of accuracy of certain claims. So those claims we call as hypothesis, and then we try to check whether those claims which have been made are all right or not. So let us consider a day-to-day example. So suppose, I think this one is better, na? Okay, so suppose some perishable goods are being sold by the sellers. So you might have heard the terms like organic vegetables or fresh vegetables, fresh apples, fresh fruits. So how do we know whether they are actually fresh or not? Or how do we check whether they are organically grown or not? So now in this session, we are not going to see how we can check whether they are organically grown or not, but we are going to see what do we mean by testing a claim made by a person or a company. So the question is now, can we test such a claims? So when somebody claims something, we is it possible statistically to test those claims? So now in this context, the term fresh is a very qualitative term. So something that appears fresh to me may not appear fresh to you. So it's not a quantitative term. So let us consider a easier example wherein the claim which is made is quantitative in nature. And this comes now under the category of engineering, I feel. So suppose a manufacturer of certain spare parts of a vehicle supplies the spare parts in huge numbers to the manufacturer of the vehicle. So it's like some spares are definitely manufactured outside and some spares are manufactured inside. Now the spares which are manufactured outside, so there are several quality checks. Even for those which are manufactured inside the company, they also have quality checks. But those which are being produced outside the company, they have more stringent and stricter ways to check the claims made by the sellers. So now here the seller is claiming that the lot of the spares sent by him contains less than 0.5% defective items. So 0.5% is considerably low value. So now this kind of claim can be treated as a hypothesis. And this hypothesis then needs to be tested seriously. So how do we test this hypothesis? That is the question now. Sorry. So how do we test this hypothesis? That is the question. Now, in terms of statistics, hypothesis is usually denoted by a standard letter. You might have seen that letter in your textbooks of statistics. That is H naught. So let us have an introduction to the broad concept of hypothesis. So what is a hypothesis and what's a test? So hypothesis is basically a statement made about the population parameter. Okay, now what is a population parameter? So let us go back to the example. Here we are saying that a manufacturer or the seller of the spare parts, who is a supplier, basically supplier for the company which is producing vehicles. So now this seller this particular seller in general, he is not just manufacturing this particular spare. Na? He is again another manufacturer himself, and he is uh, manufacturing different types of spare parts. So there is a certain standard that is being maintained by this particular seller or manufacturer of goods. So this particular seller, it's possible that his quality standards are so that there are never more than 1% defective items. In the way he makes the items, the procedures are so stringent and quality assured that not more than 1% items are having any kind of defect. So it's like now this 1%, this value 1% becomes the, or you can say 1% is the percent of defective items produced by that particular seller. So because in general, the quantity is not known, but it needs to be estimated from the data that one would gather by examining the items produced by this particular seller. So this quantity, the percentage of defective items produced by this particular seller, this is referred to as population parameter. So population parameters are always unknown. What we do is we try to estimate them by certain procedures. And then we try to test using those procedures, extending those procedures, we try to create a test or a decision procedure to test a hypothesis about those population parameters. So let us try to understand this concept of hypothesis and test in this in the context of the example that we were discussing. So, but let me first finish this. So usually whenever we say a hypothesis, we actually deal with a pair of hypotheses because it's a kind of relative comparison. So you have one hypothesis and you have one against or opposite hypothesis. So the hypothesis that is so important to you, that or default hypothesis that you call as null hypothesis, and the hypothesis which is not supporting, which is exactly opposite of the null, is called as alternate hypothesis. So now usually the default hypothesis becomes the null hypothesis, and the hypothesis whose wrong rejection is a critical error is termed as H0 or null hypothesis. Now I would like to talk about this point as well. What do we mean by null hypothesis, alternate hypothesis, or for a given pair of hypothesis? How do we decide which one is null, which one is alternate? So for example, let us come back to the question of this manufacturer. So this particular seller or supplier is supplying his items to the manufacturer. Now his items, so from the seller's point, now let us suppose that you are that seller and you are supplying goods to this manufacturer. So now what could be a critical situation for you? Suppose as per your standards, you have produced a decent quality items and you have sent, say, a lot of 100 items to the vehicle company. And then what happens is your lot gets rejected. So that's a critical situation. It's a serious situation. So in this case, why this could have happened? So let us consider a hypothesis in this context. So when the supply came to the vehicles company, what they did was they tested a hypothesis whether the percent of defective or the qualities of so and so standard or not. So you can roughly say that the quality is high or not. So somehow they measured it and then they the hypothesis got rejected from their end, and so they returned the lot. But this is a critical error. So the hypothesis whose wrong rejection is a critical error. So now how do I say which hypothesis here I am talking about? So say I say that the percent of defectives is less than 1%. So P, suppose P is the percent of defective items, then P being less than 1% is the hypothesis of interest. So this hypothesis, if it gets wrongly rejected, then it's a critical error for the person who has supplied the goods to the company. But it's not a critical error for the company who has rejected the lot. So from the seller's point of view, from the supplier's point of view, the hypothesis that P is less than or equal to 1% is a important hypothesis. It matters a lot, and this hypothesis wrong rejection is going to cause losses to the seller, and so this hypothesis should be treated as H naught from the point of view of the supplier. Whereas now, let us consider from the point of view of the company. So if the company accepts a bad lot, then that would be a bigger issue for them. So they would think that it should be such that they should not end up getting a bad lot. So their quality, so in that case, their hypothesis would be H naught would be whether P is greater than, means the quality, the number of the percentage of non-defectives is less than 99% or not. That would be their null hypothesis. So when a pair of hypotheses is available, one should decide very carefully which hypothesis should be treated as null hypothesis and which hypothesis should be treated as alternative. So accordingly, two types of errors occur here. Type 1 error. So type 1 error is rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true. And type 2 error is accepting the null hypothesis when it is not true. So obviously, whenever you are dealing with a hypothesis, you are bound to make an error. So either you would reject the null hypothesis when it is true, means the company will end up accepting the bad lot, or company will end up rejecting the good lot. So these two types of errors are possible. So in the same manner, type 1 error is probability of rejecting the null hypothesis. Sorry, it's rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true. And type 2 error is accepting the null hypothesis when it is not true. So how do we proceed further? So usually whenever a statistical test is developed, the type 1 error is fixed at a certain level, say 5% or say 1%. You might have heard the terms like level of significance. So you test the hypothesis at 0.05 LOS. LOS means level of significance. Or you test the hypothesis at 0.01 LOS. So by LOS, they mean level of significance. So by that, they mean that the probability of wrong rejection of null hypothesis is not more than 1% or 5%, whatever is the LOS. So now simultaneous minimization of these both errors is not possible statistically. So the idea is put some upper bound to the probability of one type of error, that is type 1 error, and then try to minimize the probability of type 2 error. So all the statistical tests that we use are constructed by keeping this in mind, that probability of type 1 error should not exceed 1% or 5%, and probability of type 2 error then should be as minimum as possible. So all these tests are designed in such manner. So now let us look at popular tests. So you might have heard now, suppose you are dealing with a normal setup, means whatever items that are being tested, they follow normal distribution. So for example, the proportion of number of defective items in a lot of size, say 100. So this proportion in the long run, because the sample size is 100, so we can safely assume that this estimate of proportion of defective items in a lot of size 100 will follow normal distribution, and then we can assume it to be mean equal to mu naught and variance equal to, say, sigma square, which is denoted here, sigma, by the letter sigma. So I hope all of you are familiar with the normal distribution, the bell-shaped curve, and the two parameters of the normal distribution, that is the mean parameter mu, usually denoted by the letter mu, and the variance parameter, usually denoted by the letter sigma square of this. So when the data is following normal distribution, then a hypothesis regarding the mean of the data mean value of the data can be tested like this. So the statement, the standard statement is this, that we are testing a hypothesis H naught where mu is equal to mu naught against H1 which is mu not equal to mu naught. Now to test this null hypothesis mu equal to mu naught, the Z test statistic, that is the Z test, is this. It is root n times x bar minus mu upon sigma. Now what is this x bar? So this x bar is the mean proportion of defective items in a lot. That would be your x bar. And then root n would be the size of the lot. And then you adjust, you define it like this. So you plug in the value of x bar, then you plug in mu equal to mu naught and you get the value of z. Here the major assumption is that the variation in the data is already known. So when the variation in the data is not known, then we go for a t-test. Yes, sample mean. Very good. So how does this work? So the Z test is, it rejects the null hypothesis if this Z value cutoff specified by the normal distribution. So the right, so this xi 1 minus alpha by 2 is the cutoff that you get from the right side. So it is usually, so for level of significance as 5%, this is usually for standard normal this distribution, this number is usually 1.96. And for the same standard normal distribution, this xi alpha by 2 is minus 1.96. So if the Z value is either greater than 1.96 or less than minus 1.96, then one would reject the hypothesis. So this is a common, very common, extremely popular test when the underlying distribution is normal. So all these are, please keep this in mind, that all these are optimal tests in the sense that probability of type 2 error is already minimized for these test procedures. So, and probability of type 1 error, which you call as a level of significance, that has an upper bound, which you call as level of significance. So now comes the not so popular part of the test, and that is p-value. So I think that many of you must have heard about the notion of p-value and what to do with it. Why? What to do? What to do when the p-value is very small? What should be the requirement? Should the p-value be small or should the p-value be large? So let us talk about p-value first. So p-value is basically probability of obtaining test results as at least as extreme as the result actually observed under the assumption that the null hypothesis is correct. Means if I assume that the null hypothesis, what is the null hypothesis in our context? The null hypothesis is mu equal to mu naught. So if I assume that the null hypothesis is true, means the true parameter, the normal distribution has mean mu naught, then what is then under this assumption, now what is the chance that the Z value will be extreme? The observed Z value will be extreme. So in the context of our example or the Z test, this p value simply means probability that Z is greater than Z naught or Z is less than Z naught. Now what is this Z? So this Z is the standard normal random variable. So this root n x bar minus mu upon sigma, where mu equal to mu naught, is, if H naught is true, this is supposed to follow standard normal distribution. Okay, so now when you actually get the sample with the data, you plug in values, you calculate the value of Z, you call that calculated value as Z naught. So p value is nothing but probability that a standard normal random variable will be either greater than Z naught or a standard normal random variable will be less than Z naught. So it's like, in another way, you are trying to estimate the type 1 error. So if it is very small, then it would mean that the data is not supporting the null hypothesis. And then in that case, the null hypothesis should be rejected. So in short, p-value measures the probability of evidence in the support of the null hypothesis. So if probability that you will have evidence in the support of the null hypothesis is very small, it will mean that the null hypothesis itself would be wrong. And so one should reject the null hypothesis. So reject H naught. If P usual, this is now a thumb rule. Most of the people follow this. So reject H naught if P value is smaller than 0.05. So this is a common P value. P value is very common. All the softwares these days report P value. Your research papers, you have to report P value. So I think you must have heard this. So today I felt like explaining this a bit more. So last 15 minutes of our encourage those who are listening right from the beginning to ask questions, to note down your questions, and then ask them at the end of the talk. So the Z test earlier case, Z test was applicable to the normal data provided that the variance is known. The variance is known itself is a big assumption and it is rarely true. Variance parameter, both the parameters usually are unknown. By both parameters, I mean mean parameter and variance parameter. So both are usually unknown. So Z test is uh, unless one is sure about the variation in the data, Z test is not applied. And so comes a counterpart of it. What if variance is known, variance is unknown? What do we do? So usually when variance is unknown, it is estimated using the data through sample variance. So population variance, by variance, I mean population variance, which is denoted by the letter sigma square. So when the population variance is unknown, it is estimated through sample variance. And the sample variance is denoted by the letter S square. So here comes the t-test. So now instead of Z-test now, this t-test, because this test statistic follows t-distribution, students t-distribution. So in the same manner, we can explain this. The only change is you can see some common, numerator is common. In Z-test also you had root n x bar minus mu. Here also in the numerator you have root n x bar minus mu. So in a way, what we are doing in the numerator, we are trying to see how much away the sample mean is from the claim made by the hypothesis. So when you actually calculate the test statistic, you have to put mu equal to mu naught. So if sample mean is far away from the claimed mean, then automatically this value will be large and as a result, you would end up rejecting the hypothesis. So automatically, you will accept this hypothesis if the sample mean is considerably closer to the mean claimed by the hypothesis. So again, here also we have, I'm talking about two-sided test. So you either reject, you are going to reject it if it is too small or too large. So this is about, this is a very general, very broad concept. We are just talking about one aspect of the data. And that aspect is mean of the data. Right now, mu. Here also in Z-test, we were talking about mu, mean of the data. Even in T-test, we are talking about mean of the data. But we don't want to check only, or we don't want tests only about means. Na? We want to do more things. So, because Z-test and T-test involves a major assumption, that is normality. Normality of the data. So how do I check whether the data is normally distributed or not? So here comes the famous Shapiro-Wilk test. You might have heard about this test. So Shapiro-Wilk test is a famous test used to test the hypothesis of normality. This test statistic is basically a measure of how well the ordered and standardized sample quantiles fit the standard normal quantiles. So the statistic will take a value between 0 and 1, with 1 being a perfect match. Means when the statistic takes value 1, it will mean that standard normal is the best possible distribution for this data, for the given data. And when this W will be equal to 0, it will mean that it's the worst possible probability distribution for the data. So let us try to understand what do we mean by this. So W is basically, you suppose x1 to xn are the values of the data, then you arrange them in increasing order and then these AIs are constants. So the predetermined constants. So you see how much is the scaled summation of the ordered values divided by the variation in the data. So see, if you don't understand this test statistic, doesn't matter. You should be able to understand how to use this. So we shall see this. We shall come back to this test when we do things in R. So yeah, Shapiro-Wilk test, we shall be learning all these Z test, T test, Shapiro-Wilk test, all these we are going to use in R. So yes, we shall see that also. And then comes, now see again, this normality is one thing. So you can easily check using the Shapiro test, you can easily check whether the data is following normal or not from the p-value of the Shapiro test. If the p-value is very small, say less than 5%, you are going to reject the assumption of normality. If p-value is more than 0.05, you are going to accept the normality. So in our data, we shall see whether what whether the data is normally distributed or not. We shall see that. So now comes one more step, that is one-way ANOVA. So again, the assumption of normality is there, but now you want to compare different groups in terms of means. So see, t-test was just one, we were talking about mean of one data. So in the similar manner, we have pair t-test, which can talk about comparison of means of two groups of data, means two sets of data or two different samples. Two different samples. So in case of ANOVA now, we don't have just one group of data, but we have multiple groups of data. So for example, say for 50 vehicles of different makes, mileage was recorded. So for say a Tata vehicle or there are there are other brands of cars in the market. So for all the brands, say small utility vehicle I'm talking about. So how much is the mileage for a small utility vehicle belonging to say particular brand, say brand A? Then how much is the mileage of the SUV belonging to brand B, and so on. So I want to check on the basis of mileage, which brand is performing the most or the best. So what one would do, for each brand, let us choose say 10 or 30 10, 20 vehicles. And then for those 20 vehicles, you have got the mileage, actual mileage data. And now you have this for all the brands. Now on the basis of this mileage data, you can compare the brands and you can see whether the brands are differing significantly in their mileage. So here this is a typical one-way ANOVA, because there is only one factor that is being differing things, and that is the brand or the make of the vehicle. So when the data differs on the aspect on the basis of just one, then one can go for one-way ANOVA. So in this case, the null hypothesis is that there is no difference in the mileage. Doesn't matter which brand you go for. And the alternate hypothesis would mean that the average mileage is differing from brand to brand. So the average mileage is different for different brands. So how do we do it in R? That also we shall see. So are there any questions so far? Or you can ask it at the end. So this was one-way ANOVA was a bit ahead. So I want to show you now one more thing related to testing, and then around.
Madam, can I ask a small question, madam?
Yeah, please shoot.
Madam, actually, thank you so much actually for this wonderful class. But we are a new platform for this statistical tools actually. So I feel a little bit you are doing fast, I think. So can you slow down if it's so helpful for
Yes,
us to
yes, yes.
beginner?
Okay, thanks for this.
We are beginners only, madam.
Yes, I understand.
Because we are from commerce management studies. So this platform is
okay.
actually.
I thought the majority are from yes, I understand.
Please, if you go in a little bit slower, will be so helpful for us, madam. Thank you, madam.
Okay, do you want me to repeat something from the?
No, you can start from one way ANOVA, madam.
Okay, one way ANOVA. Shall I repeat what I have said?
Yes, madam.
You know it. You will understand it easily when we do it in R, because you will have data in front of you, na. So, okay, I'll tell you, but again, I'll repeat. So it's like you must have heard people talking about different brands of cars, na? Let it be SUV or other sedan or other types of cars. So they usually people want cars to be economical, na? Fuel efficient cars. So fuel efficient. So how do we measure fuel efficiency? So one way to measure is how many kilometers will it run if it consumes say 1 liter of fuel. So now what we do is for each brand of the car, say we take, now data size is not in our control always. So suppose you could get only 10 cars per brand. So that's all right. We can still test this hypothesis. So suppose for 10 cars, you have got this mileage. It's like you requested or you got it from online. Somehow you got this data that for 10 cars of the same brand and which are uh, under in identical condition, means say each car has run around 10,000 kilometers and each car is well maintained. So we are assuming certain things. So under all these assumptions now, these 10 cars, so mileage data is recorded, say every month. So for say month of Jan, how much mileage did it give? Then month of Feb. So average mileage per year you will get for one particular car. Okay, so the same thing now you are going to repeat for each car. So you have got 10 cars. So maybe if not for a year, at least for a month, you can do that. And you can ask the user or the driver, how much mileage is it giving? So this also will be treated as this information also becomes data here. And now you repeat this story for the rest of the brands. So now you have got a data matrix. Na? So for each brand, you have 10 cars mileage. And now for say 3 brands you are comparing. So it's like you have a 10 by 3 matrix. Now what do we want? We want to check whether the average mileage given by brand A equals the average mileage given by brand B, which is same as the average mileage given by the brand C. So it's like now I am talking about comparing 3 means, not one, but 3 means. So how do we do this? How do we compare 3 means? So one way to do this is ANOVA table. So instead of, yes, somebody has raised hand.
Ma'am, there is one question. It's Dipali.
Yeah.
Ma'am, in case we are comparing the two groups, then we use a t-test.
Pair t-test.
Pair t-test. And in case we are comparing more than two groups, then we use one-way ANOVA.
One-way ANOVA, correct.
Okay, and one-way ANOVA cannot be used for the two groups.
You can use it, but then it will be same as t-test.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
There is no harm in using one-way ANOVA for two groups, but it will be the same. The result won't change, whether you use one-way ANOVA or you use pair t-test. The conclusion will not change.
Thank you, ma'am.
That way, statistical tests are robust.
So I want to ask, which one give the correct answer? One-way ANOVA or t-test?
Both of them will give you the same conclusion. Whether you want, the conclusion would be about equality of means, na? So whether two groups have same mean or not. So if t-test is telling you that the hypothesis of equal means is wrong, then one-way ANOVA also is going to give you the same result. They won't differ in the result.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
So it's not like you would prefer one over the other, but I'm telling you a thumb rule. If you have just one sample, then go for normal, the usual t-test. And if the variance is not known, so I'll go back. See, so if you have sample, just one sample, then go for z-test if the variance is known. But in reality, variance is rarely known. So we go for this t-test. And then if you have two groups, so two sample problem, then you go for pair t-test. I have not mentioned it here, but we shall do it in R. And then when you have multiple comparisons to be done in one go, so through one hypothesis, you want to check whether all groups are differing in their means or not. then you go for one-way ANOVA. Okay, so shall we continue?
Madam,
yes.
Thanks for the session. Very good examples. Can you just once again brief on p-value once again?
Yes. I was expecting this. Okay. Sure. This. Okay, so I'll tell you an example. This one, na. So suppose we are having a Z test, and what I have done is I have got the data. I have calculated this X bar, sample mean I have got, and then I have some assumption, and then so I'll put mu equal to mu naught here. So I'll calculate this Z value. I have sigma, I have root n, everything. So I've calculated Z. Say Z I have got as say 1.33. All right. So suppose I got Z as 1.33. Then this value would be called as Z naught. Z naught is 1.33. So what is the probability that a standard normal random variable is more than 1.33? This probability would be p-value. So what is the chance that a standard normal random variable is either greater than Z naught or a standard normal random variable is either less than? Because when it is very large or very small, then you are going to reject it, na? So what is the probability that this statistic, wait a minute. Sorry for the disturbance because I am conducting session from home. Na? So, but okay, let me get back to this. So this this is itself a random variable. This is supposed to follow, if H naught is true, this is supposed to follow normal 0, 1, standard normal distribution. So when I get a value, say Z naught, so what is the chance that if I had a normal random variable, then I would have got a value as low as this or as high as this? So this chance is nothing but the p-value. I will explain this in R. We will see.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very
Please
much.
remind me when we do the R session. Na? Please remind. And today I would suggest just focus, because this session, entire session is getting recorded. So whatever I am saying, I think the recording would be made available to you. So you can see it later also. So right now you focus on what I am explaining. And those who are already familiar with R, they try to work it out now along with me. But the rest of the group, please try to work it out later.
Sure,
Yes,
ma'am.
Ma'am,
there
one
is
more
one more
question.
question. Yes.
One more question, ma'am.
Yeah,
I'm
please.
Dr. Bishmala. It's a good session, ma'am. I have one question related to the p-value.
Okay.
Most of the time when we are doing a research, at the time of analysis, it count as a p-value should be 0.5 or less than that. So what is the meaning of that ki less than 0.5 or something like?
See, usually when you have a null hypothesis, when you are testing a hypothesis, you want its rejection. Usually a null hypothesis is of no difference. So for example, in the context of medical statistics, means medical background, whether a new drug is effective or not, they want to see. So the null hypothesis would be that the drug is not effective. So all the doctors, all the medical researchers, they want this hypothesis rejected, because then only the new drug that they are proposing would be made available in the market. So what p-value does is it checks whether when you say p-value is 0.05, it means that the data is supporting the hypothesis. The support that the data is giving to the null hypothesis is less than 5%. So when the support is less than 5%, then you should reject the hypothesis. That's why you are told to see whether the p-value is coming out to be less than 5% or not. So 5% is a kind of global cutoff for p-value. So if p-value is less than 5%, you reject. And in most of the cases, you desire rejection of H naught. That is why p-value, people ask you to check whether p-value is less than 5% or not.
It's a
Have I
rule or
answered your
a
question?
assumption, madam?
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes?
Madam, it is a rule or we are assuming that we are rejecting, madam?
No, it's not an assumption. It's a general, there is no formal rule as such, but you can say it's a thumb rule, globally accepted.
By practice, we are doing it,
Yes,
right?
it is there in the practice. Even in medical field or in engineering field, everywhere, 5%. Some people, those who are very strict. So, for example, in medical field, certain tests or certain drugs are very critical. And so, unless there is already, suppose the existing drug is working very well, so nobody wants a costlier drug. So what is the chance? So in that case, they would say that unless it is p-value is less than 1%, I am not going to accept this new drug. So this is even stricter condition, na? Earlier, usually 5% is all right. Means p-value less than 5% is acceptable. Then in that case, you reject the hypothesis. But in some certain research papers or in certain research area, the requirement could be that unless your p-value is less than 1%, you don't reject the hypothesis. So it's possible. So, but 1% or 5%, nothing more than other than this. Yes,
Yeah, ma'am,
please ask.
one question. Means this particular p-value has been dependent on the confidence interval. So if we consider the confidence interval with the 95%, then the p-value will be 0.05. Otherwise, means if we consider the 99% confidence interval, then 0.01 will be there, right?
P-value, I would say type 1 error, the earlier one, not p-value, but I would say this probability of type 1 error is connected with the 95% interval. This one, this one.
Oh, okay, ma'am.
This
Thank
is
you.
same as p-value is data dependent. See, probability of type 1, when you say less than 5%, that 5% is the level of significance. You have decided this or the user has decided this. So it's already there. But p-value is the evidence that you get from the data. So it changes. As the data changes, it changes. Okay, I'll share one of the experiences that I have had. Yes, please ask your
Suppose,
question.
madam, if suppose the p-value is more than the 0.05, so automatically it will be acceptable.
Pardon? P-value is?
If it is more than that, 0.05, madam.
More than 0.05, then you are not going to reject. Then you should not reject.
So maybe the mistake the data, right?
No. You would say that the data is not supporting the hypothesis. Then in that case, you should change the hypothesis.
Okay. So either we should not say the data,
Data
right?
is not supporting. See,
Because
5% means
why?
data is not accepting your claims. Very simple. So I'll share a story. Because this is becoming an interactive session. So I'll share something.
Because
It's
you said
possible
no.
that you get 10% probability, p-value 0.1. What to do with this? So you would say, or say 0.06. So slightly more than the boundary, but it's not. What do you do then? What do we do? So then you can tell your client. So I'm talking about the collaborator. You must have heard, I'm doing collaborative work with research institutions. So you can tell that there is a not so significant, but evidence. There is an evidence which supports, but not a strong evidence, but there is an evidence which supports the null hypothesis. And then in that case, you can decide the user to take the decision. If possible, then you can let the client take the decision, or at least can add if you are writing a research paper, then you can add a footnote, okay? With a minor evidence, there is a minor evidence which supports the null hypothesis. So you are not rejecting it clearly. It's a boundary rejection. That's possible. That happens. Yes, there was one more question.
Ma'am, there is a question. May I ask?
Yes, please.
Yeah, ma'am, p-value indicates that it is actually how much strong evidence we have got. So it is actually the strength of the evidence.
Strength of the evidence against null hypothesis.
Yes.
Yes.
And also,
Sorry,
I
in
mean,
support of, I'm sorry, in support of null hypothesis. So when you have, say, only 5% evidence in support of null hypothesis, then you should reject it.
okay. So it is actually the probability.
Correct. P-value is always a probability.
Got it. And I mean, since it is a probability, how do I actually define it in terms of the ratio, favorable cases divided by total?
No, ma'am. Ratio is not the only way to define probability.
Okay.
I'll have to say this now. Ratio is just a very crude way to measure probability. Ratio doesn't work in several cases.
So, how can you best define that for
See,
p-value?
you will have to study basic statistics for this.
No,
Very
that's
basic.
okay.
There is a concept of probability distribution. You
Yeah,
might have heard about distributions such as binomial, Bernoulli, normal, bell-shaped curves, and all. So all these distributions, area under the curve is probability.
Correct. Yes, that is PDF, probability density function.
So that is how these probabilities are calculated. Area under the curve.
Correct.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
So, hello.
Hello.
So,
Hello, ma'am.
sorry, sir. Ma'am,
Hello,
how
this
do you
is Sushant,
define the
ma'am.
p-value?
Yes. One at a time. So I think Mrs. S. Merlin was asking a question.
Ma'am, can you say a few words about either one-tailed or two-tailed values, table values?
In our case, the Z-test it was a two-tailed hypothesis, na? I was checking whether, okay, let me go back. See, mu not equal to mu naught. So my alternate hypothesis is two-sided. So the test will also be two-tailed test.
Yes. Okay. Whether it is less than or greater than, we can go with the one-tailed test.
Sorry, there was a disturbance at my end, so I had to mute myself. Yes, it is because it depends on the alternate. If the alternate is two-sided, your test is two-tailed test. That is always the case. Yes, Sushant, Mr. Sushant Das. Please ask.
Ma'am, regarding that p-value, so generally what we can take an example that with age, the size of a shoes increases as the
Sorry, I
age
can't
grows.
hear you clearly, Mr.
This is the
Das.
null hypothesis. Ma'am, we can start with an example like with age, the size of shoe increases. Okay, so this is it is the standard. This is null hypothesis. Okay, but generally it does not happen always.
But see here, there are two things. It's not just one. This is a typical setup of regression model.
That's what I'm explaining. Yes, that's what I'm explaining. So now if I take the height, if I plot height with shoe, I'll get and fit it, I'll also get a p-value. Now, if it is true, that means with height, with age, size of a shoe increases, my p-value would be 1. But we won't get it. What we want to know that how close we are. So basically that we are nullifying the null hypothesis. No, it is not true. It is not always happen. And if the p-value is between 0 and 0.5, then my null hypothesis is not valid. My alternate hypothesis is valid. Is the way we can explain?
I'll tell you the problems with your question. See, it is like when you say with age, the shoe size increases. So this hypothesis is talking about a bunch of normally distributed. Means you can assume normal distribution for the random variable. Because when you say age, you have to start from say age 0, age 1, age 2, age 3.
Yes.
Go on. So it's like you don't have just one. So for at each age, there will be one normal distribution. So suppose I consider all the infants, the newborn babies and their shoe size. So they and then the age 1 and their shoe size. I'll have some data. So you don't have Z test
Yes.
here, na? You should have, and all these are, see, because the same person, I'm assuming that the same person is being studied
Yes.
age-wise. So it will be a long study. So it is definitely not Z test or T test or ANOVA, but this is a regression test because you are taking
Yes.
age as
Yes.
a covariate, as a regressor, and shoe size as a response variable. So you should go for
Yes.
regression analysis, not the Z test or T test.
Yes.
And through regression model, you should try to test this hypothesis.
Okay. Okay. I got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent.
So,
Okay.
yes,
Thank
so
you.
I think I am happy that people are asking questions because I had this fear that this would be a one-way communication, and I do not enjoy it much unless question answers happen. This is really a joyful ride for me so far. So shall we now, I wanted to show you something really interesting, and I think it could be useful to you. So I have written a small article. I haven't put it in slides, but I've opened it here. So it's about chi-square test. So have you heard about chi-square test of independence? At least few of you might have heard.
Yes,
And
madam.
few of you might
Are you
have
displaying that, madam?
chi-square test, na?
But that test screen is appearing, it seems.
Yeah, I have not started it. I'm just giving you a background
Fine.
introduction. Okay, now can you see the screen? See here.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
visible.
So this is clear, na? I tried to download this file, but somehow there is some error with my Google Docs, and so I could not download, but I'm showing it now, and I'll share this file also later. So I have written this article. I haven't published it anywhere, but I just wrote it because I realized that several people are not aware of this. So you might have heard about chi-square test. So chi-square test is basically talks about this. So let us first try to understand what do we mean by chi-square test, and then we shall move to the session in R. So what is it? What is chi-square? What do we do? Why do we need it basically? So this is just a Google information, but you can easily see this. It's a test that measures how a model compares to the actual. This is chi-square goodness of fit, but I'll show you. You can safely ignore this. So, okay, this is the setting. Can you see this clearly? All of you, is this easily visible? Because I am not using the usual PowerPoint or PDF Acrobat Reader. I have just opened it from the
Yeah, visible, madam.
visible. So I will start this explanation with an example, and then I'll explain. Okay. So this is based on real data. From the collaborative work that I am doing, I have got this data. So it's like we are talking about students. So there is a school which admits tribal students as well as non-tribal students. So we are talking about ethnicity, not caste, I would say ethnicity. So whether it is tribal or non-tribal, that is one information I have, and the kind of grades that these students have got. So whether they get, so these students are, you can say 8th, 9th or 10th standard students, and the final grade that they get. So if above 90%, then O grade, then 80 to 90%, then E grade, then between say 70 to 80%, then very good, and 50 to 70 or 40 to 70%, it is average. So something like this. So the school has this criteria. It's very clear. So they have categorized the students according to their scores, and they don't report the actual scores, but they are just giving these grades. So O, E, B and C. These are the grades that have been given. Now, out of the interest of the welfare of the students, a teacher sits and he counts. In the last year, how many students got O grade, how many got E grade, how many got B grade, and how many got the C grade. And then what he does further out of his interest is, because the school is getting funding for special funding for teaching tribal students. So but the school admits anybody in the vicinity. They are not limited to just tribal students. So what they do is they keep a record. So how many non-tribal? So considerable amount of non-tribals are also there. So non-tribal, so what they do is grade-wise they separate. So 2,821 non-tribal students have got O grade. Then 280 students, non-tribal students have got excellent grade. And similarly, these numbers can be explained. So see here, there is a data. The data is final grade of the 8th, 9th and 10th standard students. And now, so the grade itself. So I have 4 possible values for the grades. And now the data is bifurcated on the basis of one more qualitative variable, that is the ethnicity of the student. So it can be non-tribal or it can be tribal. So only 2 categories. So dichotomous. So it's like I am classifying the entire data on the basis of 2 categorical variables. One is final grade and one is ethnicity of the student. So I have got this matrix now, data matrix. These are all counts basically. I don't know individual grades. I don't know that. I have been given only these numbers. And now I am asked to check whether the kind of grade that a student grade gets is independent of his ethnicity. So this is a typical chi-square test of association. You want to see whether the 2 categorical variables are dependent or not. So here the null hypothesis says that they are independent. And the alternative hypothesis says that they are dependent. Okay, have you understood the setup, everybody? Setup is very simple and it's
Yes,
there.
yes.
So those who are working in the field of social science, they will find this very relevant. Several people come across such tables. So they don't have large data sets. Instead, they have these matrices, these data matrices. So data which can be classified on the basis of different categorical variables, different qualitative variables. So what to do with that further? So people usually apply chi-square test of association and they check. Then using the softwares, Minitab, MATLAB or typical the other statistical softwares, they check whether this hypothesis is getting accepted or rejected. Means is there any dependency or independence? So if the hypothesis of independence gets accepted, then there is nothing more to be done. But if the hypothesis of independence gets rejected, then there is a lot to be done. And then what is to be done, that I have tried to explain through the article. So far, I hope that the setup is there, is being understood. Now, what is a chi-square test of association? So the idea is, now you assume that there is no relationship between these 2 things. So every student, any student can get any type of grade. So a non-tribal student is equally likely to get all these grades. And a tribal student, so whatever chance a tribal student has, so the probability that a tribal students get O grade is more or less same as the probability that a non-tribal student gets O grade. And this is true for all the grades. So if this happens, then you would say that there is no association between these 2 things, the ethnicity of the student and the final grade. But then how do we check this? So one way to do that is assume that they are independent and then calculate. If we assume these to be independent, then what will be the count? If the total count is this much, so 2821, 280, 2292 and so on. So these total number is, I think, around 13,000 something. I don't exactly remember now, but around 13,000 students were involved. So what do we, how do we check now? So if I assume independent, then I can say, there is a formula for calculating this number, expected number. You call that as expected frequency. The formula is very simple. Take the row total, then take this column total and multiply them and then divide it by the grand total of the matrix. That would be your expected frequency for this particular combination, means non-tribal and outstanding grade. And now repeat this story for all the numbers in this matrix. And that would give you the expected number of students who got different grades and who have these 2 types of ethnicity. If we assume that there is no association between final grades and ethnicity of the student. So once you have got this, so this I'll show you. So this is the count I have gotten by assuming that there the ethnicity has nothing to do with the grades. So do you notice something here? See, if you assume them to be independent, the actual data is 2,821. So now 2,821 non-tribal students have got outstanding grade. But if I assume them to be independently distributed, means independent means the grade has nothing to do with the ethnicity of the student, then the number comes out to be 2,441. Similarly, look at here. This very good grade is being obtained by 2,292 non-tribal students. But if I assume the independence, means hypothesis of no association, then the number becomes 2,829. So now, once you have got these expected counts, using the way I told you, then now the chi-square test statistic is nothing but as I have shown earlier here already. See, this is the formula for chi-square statistic, and it is nothing but the actual frequency, that is OI, means frequency means the number that you see in the data matrix. So actual frequency means OI minus expected frequency, the counts that you saw in the next table, whole square, the difference, and their square divided by the expected counts. And you do this for all the 8 cells and then add the numbers together. That will be your chi-square test statistic. Now again, this is readily available in R. So one can easily do that in R. So now the R or any software, it doesn't just give you the test value of the test statistic. It gives you the p-value also. So here also, if p-value is less than 5%, you are going to reject. Now the question is, you are rejecting means what? What are you telling here in this context? Say here, even in this example, the hypothesis of independence gets rejected. You are rejecting.
Independence is not valid. Independence is rejected.
Means independence is not valid. Means the assumption is not valid. Correct. So there is no independence. But then the person who has gathered this data, that particular teacher will ask, na, what is causing dependence? Why are tribal students getting bad grades than the non-tribal students? Or are non-tribal students getting O and E grades more than the tribal students are getting? What kind of dependency do we have? Because based on the basis of that, the school is going to receive fund next year. So is it like the non-tribals are getting differential treatment and so their grades are more? So see, so many. So it's like a Pandora box. You're opening the Pandora box. The moment you reject the hypothesis of independence, there are so many things which one can try to answer. So through this article, I have tried to answer that. So how do we check whether what kind of dependence is there? So the idea here is, and it's not discussed in any of the textbooks. I was taught it by my mentor, Professor Anil Gore, who is a very famous applied statistician, in fact, biostatistician and a clinical trial expert. So I'm discussing it here. So what we do is this formula that I showed you, chi-square test. This formula, OI minus EI whole square by EI. So usually when we reject the hypothesis, it means that the difference, there is too much difference in the observed value and the expected value. And as a result, this addition is becoming a large number. And so this hypothesis of independence is getting rejected. So then one would want to know which combination of the two variables is giving more difference. Where do I have this large difference? So if the numbers are in thousands, then it is very hard to judge just by looking at the numbers whether that much difference is actually large or not. So one way to do that is this chi-square is addition of these 8 numbers here in our context. So you look at each number carefully. So see, for example, here in our context, for the first matrix, this one was 2821, the observed number, actual number of students, non-tribal students who got O grade is 2821. And if I assume independence, then this becomes 2441. So The chi-square test statistic calculated for this particular combination is 59.15. In the same manner, so see, for the actual number of students, non-tribal students who got excellent grade is 280. And if I assume independence, it becomes 217. So not much of a difference, na? 280 and 217. So if you look at the chi-square test statistic, it is 18.29. So earlier this was 59.15. Now it is 18.29. In the same case, for this combination is 101.93. So the largest value. So see, all these 8 numbers addition is your chi-square test statistic. And these numbers are calculated by the formula that I have shown you. It's a very simple formula. So see, the combination that is giving majority of the contribution to this addition, those combinations are responsible for dependence in the data. So which combination? So you can see non-tribal and very good grade. This is giving the highest one. Means what? So it means that if we assume independence, then the non-tribal students that get very good grade is 2,829. But if I look at the actual data, it is much lesser than expected. So it means that when it comes to the very good grade, non-tribal students aren't performing that much, na? So for B grade, you see, the number of non-tribal students are much lesser than the number of tribal students. Look at the difference. There is considerable difference. But whereas if you go for the relatively better grades, say O grades and E grades you can exclude. E grade is equal for both tribal and non-tribal. But look at the O grade. Again, see, this difference is considerably large, na? So you can say that O and B grades. So O grades is more in non-tribal, whereas B grade is more in tribals, and E grade and C grade don't differ much as per ethnicity, but O and B grade are definitely differing as per ethnicity. This is the takeaway of this simple chi-square table. So I think we should stop now about the discussion regarding the chi-square test, and we should try doing things in R.
Ma'am, can this article link be shared?
Yes, I will be sharing this.
Thank you.
The purpose of writing this article is to make it publicly available. There is a research paper wherein even more things are discussed related to chi-square. But see, very few people get their hands on those type of research papers, na? So I thought I should put everything together so that it can be used by people like you. So I'll share, definitely. So shall we move to R? We have only
Yes, ma'am.
minutes, na? I don't want to eat into your dinner time.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah. So let us try. Now we are.
Ma'am, can we get the recorded session for this?
This, I think Medha ma'am or Vrinda ma'am can answer this.
Yes. Actually, we'll upload on a YouTube channel, madam. Right? Okay, everything will be uploaded on channel.
YouTube channel. Okay,
Yes.
that is
So
great.
after that,
Actually,
you
this
will
is the
share the
guideline
link of
given
this,
by the
right?
AICTE. So we will share the link and we'll upload on channel.
Do share this link with me also.
Yes, madam.
Because
Thank you.
usually
Thank you, ma'am.
talks get recorded, they get uploaded, but I never get to watch them later. So I can't correct my mistakes, na? Later, I have no chance.
Yes,
So
madam. We
please
will share the link. Yes.
Yeah, do share. So, okay, now, see, so far we have not talked about, we are talking about very firm things, na, like t-test, chi-square test, z-test, ANOVA, and all. But we are not talking about anything that looks nice. For example, graphs. P-value, for any non-statistician, P-value is not a friendly thing. But a graph is definitely friendlier than handling a p-value. So let us see how we can use graphs to understand things, and then the tests are to be applied to validate our conclusions which we derive on the basis of the graphs. So first I'll show you a very quickly we will do this. If I start a slideshow, can you see this?
Yes, visible, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay, very good. So, okay. So this is how a typical R Studio looks like. This you must have done. POSIT. From the POSIT, you can download R Studio. First, download and install R. Complete the installation of R. And then download R Studio desktop for Windows. Even for MacBook, it is available. But I haven't used, frankly speaking, I haven't used MacBook so far for R Studio. I've been using the usual laptops, not non-Apple laptops. So please, I won't be of much help there. But you try. You can try. R Studio, I know that R Studio works even for Apple laptops. So there won't be any trouble as such. Okay, so this is how it looks, na?
Madam, as a basic question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Why we are using R Studio compared to the other statistical tools? We have a SPSS tool, there are many tools available. Why
But
specifically
see,
R?
this is firstly, okay, we have less time. I would otherwise there is very nice story behind R. You know, okay, you mentioned SPSS, na? So similar to SPSS, there is a software. In fact, a famous professional software that is S Plus. It was professional software, professionally developed software, so quite costly. So people thought about creating something which is as good as that, but which is freely available to the people. So ours first and most important thing is that it is free. Anybody can download it. Secondly, it's crowd funded. So there is a bunch of R developers. There is a team of developers who continuously try to develop more and more packages and keep uploading them to the R repository so that it can be made available to all the users of the R across the globe. So that doesn't happen for all other professional softwares. That's why I thought I went for R. And R is considered as a standard, means so most of the students, they prefer R because the student editions of other softwares have limited features. They don't have other features. And softwares such as SAS or SPSS are costly. Their student versions are available, but students' versions don't include all the features. No? They include very basic features. That's why. So this is how it file menu and click on the new file and then click on the script file and then you will get this window open here. So commands here and then you can run them and the output appears in this window. This which is now this one is the history window and this one is the console. So when you run commands which you have written here in the source window, the output appears in the console window. And then the graphs appear in this window, plots window. So major R is divided into these 4 parts: source, plots, history, and console. So these 4 things are part of R Studio. So how do we import Excel file? So I've already sent you, I think 3 Excel files have been sent to you. Data 1, Data 2, and I forgot the name of the third file, but these files are Data 1, Data 2, at least you can handle.
No, ma'am, we don't have any file right now with us.
Vrinda ma'am had shared, but those who have not received, I think they will receive.
Actually, I posted on WhatsApp. Right.
Sir, we don't have any WhatsApp link
Data
till
1,
now.
Data 2, and card choice.
Correct. Card choice.
Card choice, yes.
Yes, definitely.
All the files are posted on the WhatsApp group.
Sir, kindly join me in your WhatsApp group. Till now, I haven't get any link to join.
See, all these are, please let me, because see, we have only 15 minutes. So those who are familiar, all these are administrative matters, so which can be discussed even after the session. So this session is anyway getting recorded. These slides will be available to you. So you would be able to do this. Even later, you would be able to do this. These are very simple things. So let us see how do we import the data set. So see here I have tried to put everything. So see, click on import dataset. So here you can see the link. Click on import dataset. You click there and then a drop down menu will appear. See from here and you will have the options like From where do you want to import the file? Do you want to import a text file or a radar file or an Excel file? So you are importing Excel files. So you choose from Excel and then click from Excel. So some of you will need a package, R package, to be installed before this. So some of you may have already gotten the package, but I'll tell you the package needed is Read Excel, READ Excel. So I will show that now. I will show you how to install this package also. So once you click from Excel, this kind of window appears, and then so see here you can see library read Excel. So this package is already there. Okay, so this kind of import window will appear. Now you click on the browse and specify the file name, specify the file location, and then the file location. So I have saved the file on desktop, so it's showing me my desktop. So I'll select on this file name, data name, and then so choose data1 from the desktop, and then this data will appear in the data preview window. So now please note that you have to unclick this first row as names, and then you can click on the import. So unclick, don't forget to unclick first row as names, then only the data will appear like this. And then, oh, see, I have highlighted it here. And then see whether the correct data is getting entered, imported or not. And then the data will look like this. Okay, now what is this data? You would ask me. So this data is basically about fuel economy test results. So this is an old data set, 1975 data set. So it talks about 50 automobiles and the results, the miles per gallon for the 50 automobiles in 1975. So on an average, 17.74 miles per gallon is approximately 7.54 kilometers per liter. So I'm just specifying the conversion here. So now how do we get the summary of the data? So this simple summary command will provide you summary of the data. So summary, and in bracket just specify. So if you write C, just simple DAT will show you this data one. So summary, and it will look like this. So this summary will appear here. So all of this I will show you how to do it in R now once I am done with these slides. Only few slides are left. So mean FET, so see here you can see the minimum 9.79. See here in the console window the output is appearing 9.79. Then the first quartile is at 13.49. Then the median is 14.57. Then the mean is at 14.65 and so on. So now histogram also I have gotten here by using the hist command. So histogram shows the frequency, the way the frequencies are differing in different class intervals. And then now if you want to see, suppose those which are less than 9 mileage, they are low efficient. Then those which are in the range of say 10 to 18 are medium, and those which have mileage more than 18 are high. Then if I classify like this, then I can get the pie chart as like this. So like this. So now let us see how to do this in R. So these slides will be there with you. So shall I take a question now? Vrinda ma'am, yes,
Yes,
Mr.
yes,
Das
madam.
and...
Yes.
Okay, so please ask.
Good evening, ma'am. Can you please repeat how to import the data?
Yes, I will show you now. No? Instead of telling you through the slides, I will show you how to do this. So see here, you can see my screen. Na? My screen is visible to all.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you see the data one here? Yes? Okay, please mute yourself. So data one file I have saved on the desktop. Now what I do is this. I'll click on the import dataset. First step is click on import dataset. Then go to the option from Excel. Now see, this option will appear only to those who have got the read Excel package installed. So let me show you how to install the packages. If you go to this packages menu, na, in this window, if you go to the packages menu and then click on install, see this window appears. Install from repository. CRAN means R repository. And which package do you want to install? You want to install read Excel. See, the package name appears here. And now if you click on install, the package will automatically get installed if you are connected to the internet. So the only requirement is a stable connection to the internet, and all the packages, including the packages which are needed for installing read Excel, automatically get installed. So first install the package read Excel, and then only you can use it for importing an Excel file. So click on the import dataset, then click on import from Excel, then click on the browse. Browse tab. So see, this window is appearing. Now I'll go to the desktop and I'll select data 1 and then I'll click on open. So see, I've got the path also here, and now it's retrieving the data set. Because this is a live Zoom session, na? So the speed is a little bit less. So do you realize the first data entry is taken as column name? So we don't want that. So we will unclick this. First row as names. If we unclick, see what do we get. Now the preview changes. So this is how the data is appearing in the Excel file as well. So we will click on the import. And see, the data has appeared here. So this is how one can import the Excel file in R. And now let us try to do some basic things. So this Excel file is automatically getting stored as data 1. So so the first thing that I want is I want to look at the summary of the data. So here the Excel file is very simple. Only few entries are there, and that too only in one column. So this is the simplest possible data set that we are trying to handle. So summary data 1. I'll run this. See, the output has appeared here. You can see in the console. Can you see the summary? Minimum is 9.79. First quartile is 13.49. Median is 14.57 and so on. So the summary, the data summary is appearing here. Now we want to do more regarding the data. So the first thing that you can do is save data somewhere in R. Right now data 1 is an object, R object. I want to just talk about the one column, only one column. So I'm calling it, just to save my time, I'm calling it capital A. So you can use any number. So I'm saying A equal to data 1. Data 1 is just a matrix now which has only one column. So you can say data 1. See, the moment you start typing, you will get things. See, I'll say A equal to data 1. The moment I say data 1 and $, it shows me the list of columns that it has. Now, because this data has only one column, so only one column is visible. If the data has multiple columns, all the column names will be visible to you in this list. Now you click on this, and then to execute the command, just press Ctrl and Enter together. These two keys must be pressed to run any command in this source window. So you want to get the summary. So press, put the cursor anywhere in the command line and then press two keys together, Control key and Enter key, and you get the summary. You want to see you want to set A equal to data 1 first column. Then again, keep the cursor on any line in the command. Sorry, anywhere in the command line. So third line here. So you put cursor anywhere in the third line and the command will get executed. And now, usually we are interested in box plot, or we are interested in pie chart, or we are interested in histogram. So all these are visual tools which can be done very easily. So hist and in bracket A will give you histogram. Then box plot. So box plot And in bracket A will give you box plot. I want to color it blue, so I have specified comma color equal to double quotes blue. And I get the box plot. But what is the purpose of this box plot? So you can notice that majority of the values are in the range, say 13 to 17, na? Majority of the values. See, this box indicates the lower line of the box indicates the first quartile of the data. The upper line of the box indicates the third quartile of the data. And these dotted lines, this lower, the lowest part indicates minimum, and the highest horizontal line indicates maximum of the data. So basically, box plot is a 5-point summary of the data. So 5-point summary. So when the data is symmetric, you will see that. And what about the central line? So the central bold line is basically the median of the data. So when the data is symmetric, the median line will appear around the center of the box. When the data is asymmetric, say smaller values are high in number, then this median will appear on the lower side of the box. And when higher values are more in number, then the median line will appear at the upper end of the box. So accordingly, you can see from the box plot, you can conclude whether the data is symmetric or not. If it is left skewed or right skewed, means are lower values more in number or are higher values more in number? And are there any outliers? So if this data, because this data doesn't have any outliers, so they are not visible to us. But if outliers are there, by outliers we mean extreme observations. So if extreme observations are there, then they appear separately as cross in the box plot. Yes, Mr. Das.
Ma'am, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Ma'am, here there is no outlier in the data set, right? But we can observe outlier if there is some extreme values, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
You will
can
get
we?
the outlier. So I have tried to maximize this now. So this is clearly visible. Na? See, I will do one thing. We'll forcibly add an outlier. So I have gotten the Excel file, na? A, na? So suppose how many numbers are there? By length command, I'll know how many are there. Huh? Now my trouble is that this 50. So out of 50, so suppose I replace A50, I'm purposely doing this just to introduce outliers, is 1. I'm changing only one entry I'm changing. Now see what will happen when you look at the box plot. See, do you see something? Has something happened? See.
Yes, there is an outlier.
Yeah, there is an outlier on the lower side. It means that this observation doesn't follow the pattern that the rest of the data is following. And so this must be an outlier. Means there is a vehicle which is very, very, which is performing very poorly when it comes to fuel efficiency. So there can be, it's possible that it's a very old vehicle, it's about to be about to break down, or other assignable causes are there. But these outliers should be investigated separately. Yes, any other question?
Ma'am, one more question. Sometimes box plot has some limitations. It tells that it doesn't takes into account the distribution of the data. So that is captured by another plot called violin plot. And if some data point is outside
I am
the
aware. See,
particular.
this is additional information. Yes, box plot, violin plot, what it does is it adds the density lines along the curve of the box plot. So box plot is basically 5-number summary. Box plot doesn't claim that it is going to give you something more than that. It just talks about, say, whether the data is symmetric or not, or whether there is any outlier or not. Nothing more than that. If you want more, you go for other charts. Yes, Mr. Das. So I think we are almost at the end of our talk. I just wanted to show the Shapiro test also. So Now because the data has changed, I have changed one number forcibly. So see, the p-value has changed. It is 6.15 into 10 raised to minus 7. So how do we perform the Shapiro-Wilk normality test? So the command is very simple. Shapiro.test, and in bracket specify the variable name where you have saved the data. So here I have saved the data in capital A. So it's coming out to be the p-value. The test statistic is coming out to be 0.79 and the p-value is 6.15 into 10 raised to minus 7, which is almost 0. So you are rejecting the normality here.
Ma'am, one more question.
Yes.
From this, can we say that quartile 3 has more density than quartile 2, right?
What? Pardon?
From the plot, the quartile 3 has more observations than quartile 2?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
This is a very skewed. See, I skewed it forcibly. I should, if I do this again, I change one observation just to show the concept of outlier. If I go for original one and if I apply, if I perform Shapiro test, I get normality. See here, p-value is 0.38. It means that the evidence in the support of the data is 38%. The hypothesis. So the hypothesis says that the data is normally distributed. And I have 38% evidence in the support of the hypothesis. So I am accepting the hypothesis. So this is how it is. So, but see, Shapiro test is not the only way, or histogram is not the only way to check. Histogram is one way to check the distribution of the data, but histogram is not the only way. There is density plot also. So now R provides an a big array of graphs. So I'll show you a website because we are talking about graphs and all. So R graph, just Google R graph gallery and you will get so much. So see this one. See this one. So I think this is enough for today. We have one more session tomorrow.
Yes, madam. Yes.
So I think enough. I don't want to enter or disturb people during their dinner time. It's almost.
Madam, thanks for the excellent session. And one last question. What value of P, maybe in medical field, what value of P is considered to be good?
P value, do you mean?
Yes, yes.
See, medical field, they are waiting for rejection of null hypothesis. So 5% is enough for them. 5% से नीचे चला गया मतलब reject हो गया is not. So they are happy.
Because of commercial reasons.
Yes,
okay,
obviously.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing now.
Yes, madam.
I hope this was not overwhelming for you.
Nice examples,
madam. Yeah. Okay, thank you, madam, for such a informative session. First of all, sparing your valuable time and joining us for this session. We also do have one more session tomorrow. That's a session 3, wherein we're going to learn the statistical solutions to industrial problems, again using RStudio. So just to summarize our key takeaways, we discussed about very basic and statistical testing techniques, its importance, hypothesis, null hypothesis, errors, then different types of tests such as it's a t-test or it's a z-test or the significance of p-values, p-value rather. What kind of inference we draw through it. Also discussed about the Shapiro-Wilk test, the ANOVA, and very fantastic and very informative session was on the use of RStudio. With this, once again, I thank to you for such a wonderful and very informative session. So looking ahead for tomorrow's session, that is session 3, we conclude session 1 here. So thank you, madam, once again.
Madam, thank you, madam, for wonderful session. Please share the PPT and code, madam.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll share
everything will be
everything.
made available through AICT portal, as Siddharth sir has said earlier as well, that all sessions, videos, and the learning resources, learning material will be available over the portal also.
Madam,
And
can you share
together with
the
the links
madam
of,
number and phone number, email ID, so anything else?
Okay, Madhuri Kulkarni, madam.
Email ID is all right.
Yeah, okay.
Madam, can you share in the chat box, madam? We can just note it down.
Yeah, I'll share.
Okay.
Sure. If you have any problems, if you have actual data wherein you need some help,
Madam,
please.
they are beginners, madam. We want to learn further, madam. That's why we are asking you.
Yeah. Am I group chat, na? I'm putting my email address here. So I've shared my email address. You can connect with me here. And if you have any data, if you are doing some research and you need help, statistical help, I will try to help, definitely.
Very kind of madam.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you for asking so many questions.
Thank you, ma'am, for wonderful
It was very
session.
interactive
Ma'am,
session.
wonderful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please allow me to leave.
Yes, madam. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Good night.
Good night.
We have speaker of the session 2, day 1, session 2, Dr. Rao Saheb Latpate, sir, here. Good evening, sir.
Ma'am,
am I audible to you? Latpate, sir, am I audible?
yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay, sir.
Ma'am, but just little problem is there. My camera is not working. What shall I do?
On your system?
Yeah. My camera is not currently.
Latpate sir, it is absolutely okay. You can just share your
Yes.
PPT and start.
Yes.
Let me take this opportunity to introduce today's session 2 speaker, Dr. Rao Saheb Latpate, who is a professor at Department of Statistics at Savitribai Phule Pune University since 2008. He has completed his PhD from Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, Aurangabad, now it's Sambhajinagar. He has 29 journal articles